Motherless children have a hard time when mother's dead. Motherless children have a hard time when a mother's dead. Ain't got nowhere to go, keep her drifting from door to door. Nobody treats you like a mother do when mother's gone. Father will do the best he can when mother's gone. Father do the best he can when mother's gone. Father will do the best he can, but some things fathers don't understand. Nobody will treat you like a mother do when mother's gone. Your wife and the husband be good to you when mother's dead. Wife and husband be good to you when your mother's dead. Your wife or husband be good to you, but better than nothing has proved untrue. Nobody treat you like a mother do when mother's gone. Nobody on earth can take a mother's place when mother's gone. Nobody on earth can take a mother's place when your mother's gone. Nobody on earth can take a mother's place. When you were just starting, she paved the way. Nobody will treat you like a mother when mother's gone. Motherless children have a hard time when mother's dead. Motherless children have a hard time when mother's dead. Ain't got nowhere to go, keep her drifting from door to door. Nobody will treat you like a mother do when mother's dead. Nobody will treat you like a mother do when your mother's dead.
Hello and welcome to our weekly conversation with musicians. I'm Betto Arcos. It's a pleasure to be with you as always. For the last couple of months, I've been conversing, talking, interviewing with musicians across the continent, including musicians actually based in Los Angeles, where I live and where this program is produced. All or most of the musicians that I've talked to have to do with Latin American music. But this week is very different. This week is, after all, the weekend of 4th of July. This is the week that we celebrate what this country is all about. Yes, with everything that's happening in the country today, music helps us. Music takes us back. Music reminds us that the world is one small village, one small community. And today I have a very special pleasure, privilege, honor to have a dear friend that I've been wanting to talk to about for the last couple of months since he published his book of sort of a memoir, really, of his life. And I want to read you just a little bit of what this is about. At age 13, Mitch Greenhill's life was upended by a series of powerful musicians. As his father entered the music business, Pete Seeger, Lightning Hopkins, Reverend Gary Davis, Doc Watson, and others enter the family home. Crucially molded by these encounters, Mitch grew up to inherit that business, the business of music, to play a lot of guitar, and he can play guitar, let me tell you. You'll see that in a few. To record albums and to compose for theater. I'm very pleased to welcome my dear friend, Mitch Greenhill. Mitch, welcome.
Thank you, Betto. A pleasure to be here. I certainly value our long friendship and especially what you've been doing for the music over the years.
Um, Mitch, we got your book here in the last, few weeks, and it took me very short to read it. I have to say, I ate it up. It took me about 2 or 3 days, less than 3 days, to read it. I was so into it, or just it was hard to stop reading it. Mostly, I think because of the way you tell the story of your life, the way you tell the story of growing up in this environment, and a mutual friend of ours, Steve Hockman, said in a post, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, he said, talk about wow moments. I mean, Mitch, you were right at the heart of it all, and we're going to get to it in the course of the next 90 minutes. But first, I want you to take us back to an image, to a moment in your life when you were about 5 years old, and you saw for the first time one of the towering figures of American music, none other than the great Paul Robeson.
Yeah, I remember it well. My mom, we were living in Brooklyn at the time, and my mom took us on the subway to Manhattan, and Manhattan just seemed such a busy place. It was kind of scary. There was so much traffic and honking of horns and noise, and then we got into this theater, and it was like a sanctuary. There was a spotlight on the stage, and eventually Paul Robeson, who was, a big presence, even if he's a big man, but also a big presence. He was doing a concert for children, so he was singing songs from his children's repertoire mostly, like Shortening Bread, but he also sang some songs of liberation that he was known for. And all my kind of fears fell away, and I was focused on the music. And I think at that moment I kind of had this feeling that I want to be there. I want to be inside that music. And in a sense, the years since have been a continuation of that journey to get inside the music and live there.
Tell us about your father. Manny Greenhill founded this fantastic, and I must say, full disclosure here, I worked for your agency.
Yeah, you were our curator for Latin American music for a couple of years there. You taught us a lot.
And tell us about him and his family. They're a family of immigrants, right?
Well, both of his parents, all four of my grandparents, were born in Eastern Europe and came into the country through Ellis Island, right under the Statue of Liberty. Those famous words: "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free." Words that can seem ironic at best in this day and age, but back then too, there was also a fear of immigrants, and it was a kind of a controversial time. And his parents lived on the Lower East Side, and then when the Williamsburg Bridge was built, they walked over to Brooklyn, and that's where my dad was born. He was born into a Jewish ghetto, really, an enclave there, and everybody in that ghetto, in that barrio, saw the world as divided between abused Jews and abusive Christians, to simplify it. And my father's, I think, big moment of stepping out was during the Spanish Civil War, when he was going to college, City College in New York, and just became outraged at the fascist overthrow of the government of Spain. And he, at that point, kind of stopped seeing the world as between abused Jews and abusive Christians and saw it more as between the haves and the have-nots, the moneyed class, or labor and management, as he would usually refer to it. And that led him to, he became a steel worker and a union agitator, and that's where he kind of came into the music that we know. He started playing guitar, he started listening to Pete Seeger and Woody Guthrie at union rallies. And, years later, when he was, kind of decided to have a change of career, midlife change of career into the music business, the first two people he went to were Josh White, his old guitar teacher down there, and Pete Seeger, whom he'd heard play at a lot of these union rallies. And Pete's story was that he had been kind of a star with the Weavers. They had had hit records, but in the 50s there was this very right-wing Red Scare, and so Pete's concerts were getting canceled. He would have concerts that were booked and they would get canceled. And when my dad approached him, I remember this well. We were in Lenox, Massachusetts, in western Massachusetts after a Weavers concert, and Pete and Manny had a meeting. And Pete said, "I'm having this problem. People are booking my concerts and then canceling them." And Manny said, "Let me produce your next concert in Boston. I won't bail." And he didn't, despite some pressures along those lines.
So what year did he decide that he wanted to create a sort of agency of sorts?
Well, it was a presenting organization before it was an agency, and I guess in 1955 or so he started putting on very small concerts. They were called midnight hoots. They would start at midnight or maybe 11:30 at small venues in Cambridge. But when he started presenting Pete Seeger and Josh White, that was in Jordan Hall, which is where the Chamber Society of Boston meets. It was like high culture place, and that was 1957. And we date, and I guess that's when he established it as a company. We date the company from then, 1957.
So, and during this period, maybe a few years later, you started to get into music, right? You started to take guitar lessons.
Well, it kind of happened then. In 1957, when Manny presented Pete Seeger, Pete stayed at our house, and he would come and stay at our house many times. He'd bring his family. He and his son Dan and I became good friends, and we used to go scuba diving together in later years. And it was, Pete Seeger was a force of nature. He was a powerful presence. So just to have him in the house, and one day he took me ice skating, and which he always remembered every time we'd run into each other in later years. And then other people would come to the house and stay there. Odetta, John Jacob Niles, Ramblin' Jack Elliott. And it was, if I had tried to resist the pull of this music, I couldn't have, but I didn't really. I was taken by it. These guys were so powerful. The music was so. It was a continuation of the Paul Robeson thing, especially with Pete. Pete kind of. He would have people sing along. He would create a world in which people lived in harmony, and his songs were about a world of justice, where injustices were rectified. And this was intoxicating stuff for a kid like myself. And a year or two later, a guy named Ralph Kahn came out from the West Coast, and he stayed at our house, and he was a really expert guitar player. And he kind of worked off his room and board by teaching me to play guitar. And he was the first in a series of real teachers that I had.
The pot roast your mother made has an important part in the book. It keeps
sustained a whole generation of musicians. If somebody was coming to town, Mom would make a pot roast, and that would be, we'd just dig into it for several days. Reverend Gary Davis was another teacher, and in addition to the pot roast, he would ask my mom to sanctify his coffee, pour a little whiskey into his coffee in the mornings.
Tell us about him. I mean, he's a really special character. Reverend. Why was he reverend?
Well, he was a minister. He was an ordained minister. In Harlem, he had a church. There's been a recording released of him preaching there, and his songs were religious in nature. Well, except he would also have secular songs that he would sing when his wife wasn't traveling with him. And those are the ones who made him some money, because the Rolling Stones eventually recorded one of them. Bob Dylan recorded one of them. It was, the secular songs actually were his ticket. And but he was one of the first times he stayed at our house. He went off with Barry Kornfeld, the guy he was traveling with, and they went to a music store in downtown Boston. And the music store owner at a certain point called up and said, "This guy is here. He's playing this guitar. I can't get it out of his hands. He's disturbing the customers." Obviously, he was disturbing the proprietor of the store. And he says to my dad, he says, "You're good for the guitar." So my dad says, "Okay." So he authorized the purchase of $500 purchase, I think it was, of what became known as Miss Gibson, Reverend Davis's guitar. And, a little while later, Reverend Davis shows up with this guitar. It was the biggest and shiniest guitar I'd ever seen. It was a Gibson J200, so a huge guitar, about twice the size of my dad's little nylon job. And Reverend Davis, being a blind man, was not about to let that guitar out of his hands. So he would sit on our living room couch all day long and play the guitar. And I would kind of kneel at his feet and every now and then ask him what he was doing. And he was very good about explaining, and I became his amen chorus, and that was another stage in my guitar education.
Tell us about his chord.
Yeah, he has
special chord that he had that's unusual.
Usually, if you're playing a C7 chord, this would be the standard way to play it, and you'd leave so you have the middle strings playing, and then the outer strings would be open. Well, Reverend Davis would put his thumb over two strings down here, so he'd play all of these strings, which meant you could move it up there. And when he played, like his one of his hit songs, one of his best known songs is his version of Samson and Delilah, "If I Had My Way," which has a kind of a hook that goes. All works out of this thing, that's the same chord, except now it's a G. It's because it's up the neck. So that was opened up vistas when you could do that. He also has like his Candyman is usually if you're finger picking, you'd kind of go low string to high string like that. But Candyman for him was high string to low string, so it would go. But at a certain point, you have to get back to the thing. So here it comes. Then you have to get back again. And so forth.
All right, all these things suddenly started hitting me in the brain about this whole thing. First of all, you mentioned Boston. I want you to talk about the Ballad Room. This is a club. Let me see if I understood what this meant. This was a partnership that your father with the founder of the Newport Jazz Festival and Folk Festival, right, George Wein, created in partnership. No?
Yes, exactly. George had his club Storyville in the Copley Square Hotel.
Famous Storyville, where all the big names in jazz, Charlie Parker, blah blah blah.
Everybody played there, yeah. I mean, it was the jazz club in Boston.
Yeah.
And then the Ballad Room that George and Manny started was one flight down in the basement of the Copley Square Hotel. And a lot of great people played there. I heard the New Lost City Ramblers there for the first time, and uh, God, there was one couple of weeks where Memphis Slim and Willie Dixon were the opening act for Barbara Dane and accompanied her too. And Willie became a mentor of mine. He was very generous with his knowledge.
Was it bass player? No.
Yeah, he's the bass, and he wrote Little Red Rooster. He wrote like
Yeah.
some of the all the great songs. He was like the bass player and composer in residence for Chess Records in Chicago, and Memphis was a monster too. His most famous song is Mother Earth, which is killer. However, the Ballad Room was not really a success. It lasted a year or maybe two, and the reason for that was that the folk music audience at the time, and it's a funny thing, folk music by definition almost is old, but it became for a few years there, it became the music of the younger generation.
It was hip to
It was
listen.
very hip, yeah. And this younger generation was too young to drink. So the Ballad Room was, built on this model of Storyville was for drinkers. So the coffee house scene became more the place where the music developed. The Club 47 in Cambridge, the Unicorn in Boston, and the Golden Vanity also in Boston, out near Boston University. And those were the kind of the very happening places for a while.
Mm.
And of course, the Newport Folk Festival was huge.
Now that you mentioned that, I'd like you to read uh, a couple of paragraphs from the book.
Yeah,
This is the
I'll read
foreword.
a couple of paragraphs from the foreword, and the foreword kind of talks about a time when I was kind of between stages of my life, looking backward and looking forward. So it kind of becomes a touchstone and a little metaphor for things that happen later in the book. And it's called Running with the Herd. When I was in my late 20s, between jobs, between marriages, even as I see now, between stages of my life, I took a gig playing lead guitar in a country western band in Marshall, California. At such a juncture, the modest roadhouse overlooking Tomales Bay provided a comfortable resting place, despite a grumpy band leader and his uninspiring choice of tunes. One of the job's few advantages was its beautiful setting, and another was the soothing hour-long commute along a softly wooded coastline. On one such drive home, after work and after midnight, my guitar and amplifier resting in the bed of my Dodge van, a full moon glowed so brightly, and the road was so deserted, that I dared to turn off my headlights and let nature illuminate Route 1. As soon as I did, a herd of deer ambled out from the forest. About a dozen of these gentle creatures, mostly yearlings with the stubble of new antlers, glided beside my vehicle and in front and behind. I felt adopted as a temporary member of their tribe. No longer spooked by my headlights, they ran alongside my van for some time, navigating the coast's circuitous inlets, the click of their hooves on the roadway providing a percussive accompaniment to the drone of my six-cylinder engine. The intense moonlight reflected through the scrub oaks and off my companions, casting their shadows onto the pavement. Eventually, we reached what must have been their turf's northern frontier, and they loped away, handing me off to the next stage of my journey. So the way I kind of incorporate that is that this tribe of musicians who started showing up in my house were analogous, that and being running with that herd was always deeply satisfying.
Mhm. And it was not a small herd, shall we say. There were so many musicians that came into your life, into your living room, into the place where your father worked and where you were, that taught you, that opened their arms, and amongst other things, they taught you how to play and appreciate music. Um,
definitely.
yeah.
Although we always considered it for a long time. We considered it a kind of a secret. It wasn't mainstream until at a certain point, Joan Baez, who was my dad's first management client, was on Time magazine. Okay, then I guess we could decide that we weren't such a secret anymore. But it was kind of our cool little secret, even though there were a lot of us.
How old were you when Joan Baez and Bob Dylan showed up in the picture? I want to.
Well, Joan started singing at the Club 47. I think she was 16 or something like that, and so I must have been 14 or 15, 14, I think. And I would go, to hear her. The 47 actually started as a jazz room, and it had some great jazz. Sam Rivers was played there, and Tony Williams, who later played with Miles, was a kid about my age at that time. So Joan but this they 2 nights a week they had folk music. Joan one night and blues singer Eric von Schmidt another night, and that's when lines started forming around the block, and because she was such a big talent. And Joan was in town because her dad was teaching at Boston University, Al Baez. Matter of fact, that's how Manny first met Joan. He went to hear Al Baez speak at a organization. I can't remember what. I think it was Committee for Sane Nuclear Policy, or it was scientists who were against nuclear weapons. And Al gave a speech, and then he invited his teenage daughter to sing a few songs. And then a year or two later, when Al moved on to a different teaching gig, he didn't have tenure. He was just there for a couple of years. Joan was developing a career and wanted to stay, and so Al asked my dad to look after his daughter. That's basically how the agency part of the whole thing started out.
So that's when really the beginning of the sort of working relationship started with her.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, Manny had been putting her on in a few gigs. She played the ballad room. As a matter of fact, in the book I have this. I do an interview with George Wein, who talks about how she they were paying her $25. She wanted $30. It was finally they said, "I give her the $30."
So your father, in a sense, had three sort of. I mean, the agency these days we just think of an agency. I mean, at least the way I think about it is, that helps to find gigs for musicians. But the agency or the organization your father ran had three jobs really. Publishing was one,
Mm-hmm.
representing an artist for getting gigs, and the third was presenting, doing gigs,
Yeah.
organizing concerts, right?
I think that Manny always thought that the presenting was what he was the basic part of it. I think in his dreams he might have seen himself as an entrepreneur in the Saul Hurock mold, and the other stuff just kind of happened along the way. He would start, as I say, Al asked him to manage Joan, and then a year or two later, Ralph Rinsler, who had discovered Doc Watson, wasn't really interested in managing, so he asked Manny to take care of Doc. And we're still handling the Watson world. That started in 1964. And then when these people started making records, they needed their material protected, so publishing grew out of that.
And you still continue to do that?
Oh yeah, our publishing is, especially these days when there aren't any concerts, we're kind of counting on the publishing a little bit more to keep us afloat.
All right, well, let's I guess in that same period or around the same period or maybe later, I want you to talk about there's a wonderful photo of Manny Greenhill talking to Bob Dylan. Tell us about that moment when that happened and what was going on.
Well, Manny presented Bob in concert. When Dylan first started showing up in Boston, he was playing pretty small rooms. The Cafe Yana, I think, was his his first gig. That was even smaller than the Club 47. I first saw Bob Dylan at something called the Indian Neck Folk Festival in Connecticut. And there was a little bit of a buzz around him, and he had come to New York, to find his idol Woody Guthrie. And it seemed to me that he wasn't actually imitating Woody Guthrie, he was imitating Jack Elliott imitating Woody Guthrie. And very well, he was obviously, he had energy and a charisma about him. A few months later, I saw him again, and he wasn't imitating Jack Elliott, he was directly imitating Woody Guthrie. And then the next time I saw him, he wasn't imitating anybody. I think I saw him, I remember running into him, and he was giving an impromptu concert of sorts on by the Charles River on this grass. He was just playing some new songs that he had written. Joan was there, and a few other people. And, so it struck me, just how fast he had progressed from what was largely, imitative to original. And it's clear the guy was, monster talent. I think that photo was probably taken backstage at I think it was Jordan Hall, where Manny presented him once or twice, maybe 3 times. And I remember I tell the story in the book of a time when I had a little crisis, because I was hanging out in the dressing room or the green room with Bob and a couple of other people, and my mom stuck her head in there. I think she, told him it was 20 minutes to a curtain or something like that. And after she left, Bob made a kind of derogatory comment about her, and it was one of the series of crises of whose side am I on here. And I have to say that I chickened out. I didn't confront Bob about insulting my mom, because I wanted to be in his aura. He was obviously a big aura. And at the end of that concert, I do remember it was the first time I had seen what a rabid fan base could do, because Bob and Joan and Eric von Schmidt and I sneaked out of the place in the back of somebody's van, and we all had to hunker down so we wouldn't be, or so that Bob and Joan wouldn't be seen by the fans, who were almost aggressive in their adulation.
Gosh, so those are the early days, though, right?
Oh yeah, this is maybe he had done 1 album, maybe 2 albums.
And you were 17?
Something like that, 17, 18 maybe.
By this time, where are you musically?
Well, I'm deep into the blues at this time. I kind of got into the blues through Rolf Kahn, and then after Rolf left town, I latched onto Eric von Schmidt, and I remember I was actually a little bit pissed off at Bob Dylan for abandoning the blues. He sings he was a good blues singer. He sings 3 or 4 blues on his first album, and the stuff, writing songs. What's that about? You should stick with the blues. So
you want to play something?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I'll play a blues that I've learned from Doc Watson. Well, actually, this is actually a Barbecue Bob blues.
All right, Barbecue Bob. There's a story, not a big story, but there's a major reference in it.
But I was so into the blues that I would, and at this time there were, it's hard, might be hard for your listeners to understand that this wasn't a time when you could click a mouse and hear music from anywhere. It was hard to find these songs. The original recordings had been 78s. They were long out of print. There were some that were reissued on the Harry Smith anthology, which we gobbled up. And then Sam Charters came out with this book and record called The Country Blues, and one of the cuts on it was a Barbecue Bob song. And I kind of got very excited by Barbecue Bob, tried to find his records. There were no records available, but I found this place in Midtown Manhattan where for $20, and here I'm 16 years old, in 19 whatever it is, it's 1960. That's a lot of money. You could buy not a record, but you could buy a acetate. It's a metal. It was used as a reference. The idea is that after, say, 10 plays, you can't hear anything anymore. So you have to actually listen really hard for those 10 plays before the thing disappears.
Oh, at this time, Barbecue Bob had already passed, right?
Yeah, he never was rediscovered. We never found him there. And in some ways, while I'm happy to have access to the world's music at the click of a mouse, I have lost the ability to listen that way anymore. Anyway, well, later on, after I became involved with Doc Watson and became, his booker and his record producer, I was encouraged Doc's blues playing, because Doc, even though he's known as a mountain singer, Appalachian singer, was a fine blues player. And I guess I kind of talked him into doing his blues album, and this is one of the songs on it. It's called, it's a Barbecue Bob song called Mississippi Heavy Water Blues. Walking down the levee, my head hung low, looking for sweet mama, she ain't here no more. I'm in Mississippi with the mud all in my shoes. Folks in Louisiana got them high water blues. I swear I'm crying, can't keep from crying. Mississippi heavy water blues. Standing here looking at all of this mud, a good gal washed away in the Mississippi flood. I thought I heard her moan on the Arkansas side. Said, come on over, daddy, let your sweet mama ride. I swear I'm crying, can't keep from crying. Mississippi heavy water blues. Mama, mama, your daddy misses you. I got lots of mud and water, I don't need no water cold. All I need is sweet mama to satisfy my soul. Lord, 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 she was so kind and true. Said nobody else could love her like her sweet papa do. I swear I'm crying, can't keep from crying. Mississippi heavy water blues. Mama, mama, your daddy misses you. Well, it's a hard, hard times. My house done washed away, and I'm crying how long before another payday. Lord have mercy, I feel the ground is shaking, the whole town's sinking, all the heavy water is breaking. I swear I'm crying, can't keep from crying. Mississippi heavy water blues. Mama, mama, your daddy misses you. Mississippi heavy water blues.
So you mentioned Eric Von Schmidt. Tell me about him. Was there a bit of a rift between him and Bob Dylan?
No, I think actually the rift, there was a bit of a rift between Bob and Dave Van Ronk, who was actually an early mentor of Bob's, because Bob decided to record Dave's song House of the Rising, Dave's version of House of the Rising Sun. Bob recorded it before Dave did, and that raised some. Actually, no, Bob and Von Schmidt actually were pretty close. They did an album together when they were in Britain. Although I think Bob is called Blind Boy Grunt on that album. He doesn't call it Bob Dylan.
Huh.
And when Bob recorded Baby Let Me Follow You Down, he credited Eric with the with his arrangement of it. I think actually he was probably owed a lot of his arrangement of it to Dave because his chords are closer to Dave's. But that was a Davis song too. So I think it's on Bob's first album. Eric was a powerful figure. He was a painter and actually had done a Fulbright in painting in Rome, where he would also sing the blues at this club called Bricktops, which I eventually played at myself. And he had lived in tropical islands in the Caribbean, and he was a filmmaker. It was like every day was a art project to Eric. That's the main thing I learned from him was, create art all the time, and that whenever there was a question, he would always go for the create art answer.
You looked up to him quite a bit.
Oh yeah,
Right?
I kind of worshipped him, and it was devastating. Like one of my early times with him, he's the first time he actually invited me to visit him at his house, at his apartment in Cambridge. I showed up, and I had just come from high school, and my high school was a very conservative high school. They had compulsive is that the word, compulsory ROTC, Reserved Officer Training Corps, which meant that we dressed up like soldiers and marched around the schoolyard grounds. I guess we were getting ready to fend off the nuclear invasion they kept telling us was coming. We used to hide under desks so that we wouldn't get bombed. And when I showed up with my ROTC uniform on, Eric was shocked. It was like I was a war criminal. He banished me, and I had to kind of slink home with my tail between my legs. But then, as he said later on, but you came back, and I did. I came back, and I was devoted to him and his music for the longest time, and wound up producing an album of his.
His career didn't never really took off, did it?
His music career, I mean, he has a cult following, I guess, in music. His painting career was pretty successful. You can find his paintings in museums, and he did a lot of album covers.
Let's move forward a bit to in your career. When did you first come to California?
1964, I visited for the first time, and I was taking a sabbatical from school, and I played a few gigs. I played at the it was kind of exciting trip. On the way out, I played in Salt Lake City for Rosalie Sorrells, whom I developed a strong and long musical relationship with and personal relationship. And then I played at a place in Ketchum, Idaho called, I can't remember what it was called, but it was a converted church. Rosalie's dad had preached there, or her grandfather, I guess. And in the audience was this shy stringer for the Wall Street Journal named Hunter Thompson. And we struck up a friendship, and when I finally did get out to California, I stayed with him. He taught me how to shoot, or basically he put a gun in my hand and said, aim that way, and it was such a huge gun. It was a 357 Magnum, I think, that I wound the kickback of it wound up gashing my forehead. And then I kind of worked my way down, and I got to Los Angeles and played a gig played for a week at the Ash Grove, opening for Big Mama Thornton, who had the original hit of Hound Dog, yeah. Matter of fact, Big Mama and I shared a dressing room at the Ash Grove together.
Tell us about that club. I mean, I unfortunately when I moved to LA, I never really um, got a chance to see it, but
It
I
was a great
know.
room. Had Ed Pearl, who had a wonderful ears. He would book great music, and he understood the music very well. Um, it was the place to come. I think they had a school happening as well. I mean, and a lot of people came out of Taj Mahal when he came to town. He and Ry Cooder started a band that played there a lot. Canned Heat started at the Ash Grove.
The Rising Suns.
Say what?
The Rising Suns.
The Rising Suns, right? Yeah,
Taj Mahal band.
right. Some of that stuff is on Taj's first album, and it was a great room to hear music in. It was just kind of just the right size. The acoustics were great. The sight lines were good. Say what? Kind of like, I don't know if
The Rising
anybody's been to
Suns.
the Arc.
The
The
Rising
Rising
Suns
Suns reminds me of the the Ash Grove a little bit.
Ry Cooder told me a few stories about that place, and he said that that's the place where he really learned uh, how to. He said he would get up close to the stage so he could see how Doug Watson played, how Lightning Hopkins, how everyone that played there.
Suns, yeah. When I was
me of-
playing there with Big Mama, he was like you say, right there, front row of the audience, gobbling it all up.
And later on, of course, there's a little mention in there. Later on, in the mid '70s, I believe, I remember watching this a few years back, but I also remember because I saw the film in Mexico. Ry did started working sometime in the mid '70s for Walter Hill, composing music for various films, and he did the music for The Long Riders, which I saw in Mexico when I was, I don't know.
Right, right. I worked on that as well. I play the part of a singer in a band in Jesse James's favorite bordello, and I have this one line which I presume will be on my tombstone, which says, "It was only a request." I do remember at one time, a lot of movie making is hurry up and wait. You show up at some ungodly hour in the morning, and then you kind of hang around, and then there's actually a few minutes or a half hour of actual camera work. So me and the guys in the band we would kind of spend our time just playing music together waiting for the shooting to start. And at one point, Walter Hill walks by and he listens a little bit and he says, if I want to jam and have fun with my art, I have to talk somebody into giving me $6 million.
Now, this is 1964, I think you said, but the year before, you recorded, I don't know when it was released, but you recorded your first album called Mitch Greenhill Picking the City Blues for none other than Prestige Records.
Prestige Records, yeah. Well, Prestige, of course, was a great jazz label. They did all those Miles Davis quintet albums and brilliant stuff. And at a certain point, they decided that they wanted to explore folk music. And they came to the Boston Cambridge scene and kind of recorded a lot of us, and me too at a certain point. That was where I met Sam Charters. Sam, who had written the Country Blues book, was a producer for them. And he produced my first album, Picking the City Blues.
It's amazing, Mitch, that you were 20 years old when you recorded this album. I listened to it recently, and I have to say, it's so beautiful.
Oh, thank you. It's if I'd known this stuff was important, I would have paid more attention. But it's kind of it seemed at the time it seemed normal. All my friends were making records. I was getting impatient. When is my turn going to come? It seemed like it was just what you did at a certain point. Life has told me otherwise at various times. Although I continue to make records, but the time of there when, what am I trying to say? The music business, the music scene was such a fertile place. The record companies were interested in it. The audience was interested in it, and it was a time when you could when you could pay a lot of attention to the tradition, pick up on the tradition of it all, and at the same time be original. You know, take guitar solos that were your own, and that survives, but in isolated places these days, I think.
Mitch, take us back to this period of American history, of U.S. history. This is 1963, I think, the year before Bob Dylan put out his record as well, around the same time. Big marches starting to happen for civil rights. You go see Dr. King.
My mom took me to see Reverend King when he came to Roxbury to promote his Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. I don't know. We were always protesting something or other. I remember protesting in front of Woolworth's department store because they were segregated down south, segregated in the north. And then I did spend 10 days, I think, in Cambridge, Maryland in '63, and during the voting rights drive there. I can't say that I guess I signed up a few voters. I can't say that I was terribly effective. At one point, they put me in the pool hall because they thought that's where the voters were. My pool game got a little bit better. I don't think I was too effective. That was the year of the March on Washington, which I attended. And word has it that Martin Luther King gave a great speech, but I was a little bit hungover by that time and drifted away. So I'll have to take everybody's word for it. I did go hear Malcolm X speak at the Boston Arena. He was probably the most powerful speaker I've heard. So I don't know. It was. I feel like in retrospect, it was such a important time. In retrospect, I wish I'd kind of done more and stuck with it a little bit more. But I made a few contributions along the way.
But Mitch, I guess what I'm trying to get at is music was such an important part of this period, as far as
and as
the
we
civil
know,
rights movement, as far as right.
Sure, and Dylan's first album is full of political songs. He was always a step ahead of the game. That Lonesome Death of Hattie Carroll is a brilliant political song. And of course, Joan Baez was very political, and I think that was a big part of her, the relationship between Joan and my dad, because my dad was very left-wing political sort as well. He wasn't a pacifist the way Joan was. Joan was very committed to pacifism and nonviolence. And of course, got herself arrested on a number of occasions.
And Pete Seeger, of course.
Pete was singing songs of solidarity with Pete Seeger. You kind of felt that it was only a matter of time. We were going to triumph, and it was going to be a perfect world of peace and harmony, like now. Okay, maybe not.
Yeah. No, I mean the fact is, the contrast in terms of what's happening today versus what was happening then. I don't see music as important as it was back then today. And the sad thing is we have more access to music, right? We have more, right. Just like you said, we have all of these, tools. I mean, but of course the main tool is of course social media and our cell phones, but where we document what's happening and the violence and all that. But back then, music was such an important part of the culture, of the movement, of the uprising, so to speak. I mean, James Brown and, even the Rolling Stones tunes and Jimi Hendrix and all of that. Of course, the folk music
Hmm.
was in the beginning very important.
Well, I don't know. Do you think that that capitalism won in a sense?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I just think it's unfortunate that music doesn't have a bigger role today as it did back then.
Although, I think people like Beyonce or her Lemonade album, I think is
Yeah, I mean,
really on it.
definitely. But I just think, I guess what I want to
I
say is,
guess people don't make their own music as much.
yeah,
The music has gotten so produced, and we can all kind of do it in our little cubicles that it doesn't have the social
power.
power that it used to.
Right. Um, let's fast forward a bit and talk about a couple of other figures in your life. Jeff Mulder.
Well, Jeff and I have had a complicated relationship for a long time. He was uh, and is a brilliant musician, a fine singer. I guess, as I was thinking about it, I think I tend to uh, be attracted to very difficult taskmasters. Rolf Kahn and Eric von Schmidt, and Jeff was certainly one. He taught me a tremendous amount about music. He taught me, about jazz, which I barely knew about when I started hanging with him. He came into town. He showed up at a kind of at a hootenanny at the YMCA in Huntington Avenue in Boston. And the YMCA hoots had become, they were long-haired ladies would sing "The Water Is Wide, I Can't Cross Over," and people would sing sea shanties. And Jeff showed up. Didn't look anything like the rest of us. He looked like straight out of prep school, which he was.
First up.
Yeah, buttoned down shirts and short hair, and he started singing this sexy song, Jelly Roll Baker, and kind of scandalized the whole crowd, which appealed to me a lot, actually. And I just got taken into his orbit, drawn into his orbit. I would hang with him, and as we got older, we had families. There was a while there when Jeff and Maria Mulder, his wife, and me and Louise, my wife, and our two rugrats of kids would kind of be you see each other a couple of times a week for listening to music or have a meal together. Sometimes we'd travel, and then Jeff or along the way became a part of the Jim Kweskin Jug Band, and I don't know. I became kind of his courtier. I would kind of listen to his beefs about the band and take his side, and they were wonderful band. Very very hot band, and became a big part of the Newport Folk Festival scene.
This is the band that played at the same show where Dylan went electric, no?
Yeah, they played. They were kind of regulars at the Newport Festival. I think they played before Dylan. It wasn't their best set, and that was the Dylan going electric was that whole Newport Folk Festival was a very strange one. It is kind of a clash of cultures there, which Dylan was right in the middle of.
Also, tell us about that.
Well, it's been very well documented. Elijah Wald's book kind of answers all the questions. To me, the thing that nobody else has mentioned was that it wasn't a surprise that Dylan was going to go electric. His song, like a Rolling Stone, had been on the radio all summer long. I wasn't surprised that he was going electric, and we were me and my friends were very excited by the Paul Butterfield band who were playing at Newport, and Michael Bloomfield's astonishing guitar playing, and the beat that Sam Laywood laid down with that thing. So it wasn't really a surprise to me. What was a surprise was, well, I guess largely through my dad, I would usually have access to backstage, and I would kind of hang out there and chat with the performers and soak up the ambience. And a little before Dylan was going to go on stage, I got shooed out of there along with everybody else. It was like the start of the rock and roll green room or something like that. It was much more controlled. And then he went on stage, and I don't know. They've cleaned up the recording a lot. That's been released. I think it sounded pretty muddy to me,
Mm-hmm.
but I wasn't, offended by it, as a lot of people were. There, as it's been well documented, he was booed, and eventually he cut off. He got booed, and he left the stage, and a very nervous Peter Yarrow, who was the MC, came on and tried to quiet the crowd down and tried to coax Bob back. And Bob eventually did return to the stage. He had an acoustic guitar. I think it was Peter's guitar. And he sang, "It's All Over Now, Baby Blue."
Yes.
And it was. But to me, an equally important thing that happened at that festival was when Skip James emerged. He's the great old blues player. We'd been waiting for him for years, listening to his records, trying to decipher what he was doing. And he suddenly showed up in a very misty morning at a workshop or a small mini concert. And on this platform was Mississippi John Hurt, Son House, Booker White. I may be missing somebody, and then Skip James. And to me, these were the gods. It was like seeing Zeus and Athena and Ares. Swapping songs. It was, and to me, I thought that this was okay. Everything's going to be all right. Maybe there's racial violence going on. Maybe there's a war in Vietnam. But these gods have come down to show us the way, and everything will be all right. But then after Dylan went electric and it was booed and people were confused, leaving the grounds, it all of a sudden didn't seem all right. It was going to be a confusing time, and I guess running with the herd of deer, which is kind of what those blues giants were like, is always interspersed with, roadkill or something like that. We have to kind of balance them out. I think we're in a roadkill point right now.
Mitch, then you had children. Tell us the story of your father, and you decided, okay, I got to get serious here, and started working with your father, right?
Right. I had children. I got married young. I had children young. By the time I got married at age 20 and had my first child, Matt, at 22, and I was 26 when Tej, my daughter, was born. And at a certain point, this is in the 70s. Disco had kind of taken over. My musical dreams were not in where they were. My musical dreams were kind of roadkill, to go back to that metaphor. My computer is running out of. Whoa! What happened? Did I lose my microphone? I'm good. And I found myself playing top 40 music at a dive in. It wasn't a dive, actually. It had tablecloths. It was kind of a very middle class place in East Boston. It just wasn't what I had signed up for. Back when I had heard Pete Seeger and Paul Robeson and Sister Rosetta Tharpe and those folks. So and at this point, my dad was having a bit of a business crisis, and he was wondering what was happening with his world. and so I decided to sign on with him. I offered to, it's kind of it was kind of strange. Who is doing who a favor wasn't quite clear at the time, and but I thought I would stick it out for a few years and see what else showed up, and that was what 35, 40 years ago, and me and Matt, my son, run the business. We're trying to work our way through this strange time.
And you moved to California eventually.
I did. Well, I had actually lived in California. I first moved to California in '67, and it was partly to get away from my dad, and because he was such a strong, being in Boston, I was kind of, even though I had I'd play gigs and I had a life, it was always my dad. I was always my dad's son, and it was like a hothouse atmosphere. I had to kind of get away from it. So I moved to California, and in Northern California, I was in a band called Frontier for several years with Maine Smith and Mark Spolstra, Dave Holt, some other folks, Lee Poundstone. Then I moved back to Boston, and my dad moved out to California. So then, in '76, I moved out for good, and I've been here ever since.
I guess it was hard to go back to the weather, right? California just was irresistible.
The weather was kind of a mess. Yeah, I remember one time when I was considering going out there, it was a huge blizzard in Boston. I could barely kind of crawl my way to the subway, and I took the subway to the airport and got on a plane and got off in California, and it was 70 degrees. People were on the beach. There was bronze bodies everywhere. Okay, somebody's giving me a message here.
Yeah. I think it's time to bring up Doc Watson, and also what you have right behind the 12th string.
Yeah, let me bring that out.
Doc Watson. I mean, your dad started representing him early on.
Doc is kind of one of the great guitarists and Appalachian singers. Changed the way people play guitar, really. And he was kind of discovered by Ralph Rinsler. Ralph was actually going down to Western North Carolina to look for Tom Ashley, who was kind of who had recorded in the 20s, fine singer. And Tom was playing with Doc, and that's so. Ralph said to Doc, I think you could have a career in this business. He told him to play acoustic guitar. He was actually playing a Les Paul electric guitar at the time. And it kind of took, first time I saw him was at the Newport Festival in '64, maybe. He came with his whole family. I call it like a Watauga County ecosystem. His mom was there. His brothers were there. His wife was there. And they all sang, and it was barely performance. It was just, you felt like it was a whole culture you were a part of.
It was like the Carter family, right?
The Carter family was actually a little bit more into performance than Doc and Doc's mom and his wife never performed, but they used to sit around and sing. Then a few months later, Doc himself played as a soloist at the Club 47 in Cambridge. And I had never heard anything like that. He just kind of tore the plaster off the walls of that place. And he was obviously really deeply connected to the music. And so in '64, Ralph decided, Ralph was a folklorist. He eventually worked for the Smithsonian. He was not interested in being a music manager. So he introduced Doc and Manny, and so my dad started representing Doc. And I would run into him every now and then, but it was when I started working in '76 in the office, I really developed a relationship with him and his son, Merle, his partner. And at a certain point, Merle asked me to help him produce a record. They were kind of stuck and they needed some help. And I came in and the record turned out well. So I continued. I produced several more of his albums. And when his bass player, T. Michael Coleman, was on paternity leave, I filled in on bass and, just whatever was needed. Doc died in 2012 and was just a strong presence. He, a mentor to me and a lot of people. And then, you know, after Merle died, there was a festival called Merle Fest that started in Western North Carolina that Doc was part of, and I would play with him there. And this guitar.
This is a very special guitar with a couple of stories. First, tell the story of how this ended up in Doc Watson's collection, because
well, this guitar was made by a Swiss guitar player named Bojo, and this headstock is extremely large. That's his calling card there. And Bojo wanted to give Doc a guitar, so he called up the office, and I fielded the call. And I had never actually run across something like this before. It's kind of, there was a lot of subtext going on. What he was going to give Doc the guitar, what did he want in return? Just how much of Doc's imprimatur was he going to get, basically. And I was very confused by the, because there's a lot of things that weren't really expressed in the process. Merle was the one who kind of helped me out. He kind of, it was old hat to Merle. He kind of helped me through it. And the deal went down. Doc got the guitar, and Bojo got to say that Doc played a Bojo guitar. Oh, that's right. Doc was playing Gallagher 6-string, so he wanted to make sure that it wasn't that he wasn't going against Gallagher, because he really liked his Gallaghers. So it was idea. So this was his 12-string. Okay. So fast forward, maybe 20 years later, and it's my birthday, and a package arrives on the doorstep. And it's a guitar. It's this guitar. And I call up Doc and I say, well, Doc, I'm amazed. What is this? And he said, well, I was going to leave it to you in my will, but I wanted to see your face when you opened the case. This for a blind man, you know, but to him, a face was a voice was a face, as he would say.
Yes.
So I've been playing it for ever since. I play it with String Madness. I play it a lot. I'll play this tune. This is actually, we were talking about Reverend Davis. This is a Reverend Gary Davis song that I'll play on Doc Watson's guitar, and I'll stick in a political verse for Pete Seeger in the middle of it. It's called Oh, What a Beautiful City. 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 12 gates to the city. Hallelujah. 3 gates in the east, 3 gates in the west, 3 gates in the north, 3 gates to the south, talking about 12 gates to the city. Hallelujah. I think Reverend Davis was thinking about the book of Revelations when he wrote it, but in this times I like to sing this verse. When you see all the people marching, know where we want to be, in a land of peace and justice, beautiful city. I'm talking about 12 gates to the city. Hallelujah. Oh, what a beautiful city. Oh, what a beautiful, oh, what a beautiful city. 12 gates to the city. Hallelujah. Hear me talking. Hear you talking. what you talking? Oh, oh, what a beautiful city. Oh, what a, oh, what a beautiful city. 12 gates to the city. Hallelujah.
Doc Watson. What, you know, for someone that may not know much about him, what can you say about his style of the way he played?
Well, if he didn't invent the idea of playing fiddle tunes on the guitar, he perfected it. He used to play in a square dance band back in Western North Carolina, Eastern Tennessee. And I don't know, maybe the band didn't have a fiddle, or maybe they needed another instrument to play the lead lines, but he would play these very, complicated fiddle tunes on the guitar, which people hadn't done up to that point. I mean, I guess Grady Martin in Nashville had done something similar, but not really the same thing. And since then, every bluegrass guitarist does it. It's kind of, he changed the way people play the guitar in a sense. And then he's got another part of his world that's very old time mountain music, songs that seem as old as dirt, like that song Tom Dooley. Doc's parents knew the Dooley family, and I was talking to Doc's daughter the other day, and she told me, who really killed Laura Foster. They have a whole, they know what happened there, and it's not what everybody thinks. So, and when he sings songs like "Oh Me Wise," these are songs that go back. His family homesteaded that land 4 or 5 generations ago, so he's deep into it. And at the same time, he does, he's, like I say, he plays blues, and I've heard him play, some rock and roll stuff. He does does Elvis songs. It's kind of amazing breadth of knowledge, and it's all him. It's not like he changes. It's the same guy every time.
Yeah. Mitch, there's something about the book that I find, and I think we need to see the book again. And for that matter, tell us how can people get the book? Because I think people,
Well, the easiest way is to go to Amazon. They're selling it. But you can also get it from me, and on PayPal or Venmo, or just check me out on my Facebook page, and I'll be happy to set you up. I think my daughter Tej is going to start carrying some copies at her store in Sebastopol, California, because people have been calling up asking for it. So she figured, well, maybe I should maybe do it anyway.
What's the name of the store?
The store is called Artisana, Artisana. It's a fabulous craft store, and they're open these days up there in Sebastopol.
And Tej is actually watching this. So hi, Tej, and the book is going to be available at Artisana store in Sebastopol. There is something really special about the book. As I said before, the way it reads, the way that you tell the story. Is this something you've been wanting to do for a while, but you weren't? It took something, right? I mean, it took encouragement and motivation and all that.
Well, people have been urging me to write the book for a while. People who kind of know the outlines of my story. It took a while for me to find to figure out how to do it. There are a lot of things I didn't want to do in the world of memoir. I haven't had sex with that many famous people and that sort of stuff. When the key to it was when I decided on this, that the idea would be the mentors. And so I divide the book into, each chapter is a different year in my life and a different mentor and a different lesson learned. Then once I had that structure, within each of those chapters, I gave myself the freedom to time travel, to go backwards and forwards. Like the chapter on Pete Seeger kind of focuses around, I guess the central event is when he took me ice skating before the concert. But it kind of goes up until, the last time I saw him, which was at Woody Guthrie's 100th birthday celebration at Brooklyn College, where I was there because the Klasmatics, whom I manage, were playing, and they did a Guthrie album. So there's a lot of interweaving threads, but as long as I kind of stuck with that structure, and that's where I kind of found the voice, and I felt that I could tell the story that way.
There's something that you sort of close with as well that has to do with the blues, and I'd like you to tell us about that. It's something that you learned early on. That
you'll have to give me a little more of a hint.
Well, it's blues and death, blues and and that you have to know that this music is about what will come eventually.
That goes back to an early lesson that Rolf Kahn taught. At one point, Rolf Kahn he took the guitar out. He stopped teaching me. He said, "Today we're not going to just learn a new song. I'm not going to teach you new guitar licks. I want you to tell me about your life and your problems." And so I kind of opened up to him and started talking about problems of a 14-year-old kid, and which seems small now, but of course they're huge when you're 14 years old. And then he put the guitar in my hand and he had me start playing. And the idea was to connect with it emotionally, as beyond just the notes. And at a certain point, he said, you'll never understand the blues until you understand that you're going to die someday. So for a while, I really tried to work on that, tried to imagine myself dying. Now I'm pretty sure I will die someday, and I've been playing the blues for quite a while. Memphis Slim, I was mentioning Memphis earlier. He's got this song, Mother Earth, and the refrain of it goes, he says, you can do this, you can be all important things, you can dress fine, but when it comes back, you got to go back to Mother Earth. And that struck home to me actually when I attended Memphis's funeral and saw him laid in that Memphis earth. So but the blues is a powerful mystical force. I'm still, haven't outgrown my attraction, and it hasn't outgrown me. It still has a powerful hold on me. I think it's kind of the source of all American music, really.
It really is. I mean, the way I've learned and the way I've seen it, blues is really what the music of this country is all about. It's in every other style of music created in this country. Country, blues, jazz, rock. I mean, everything all goes back to the blues.
Well, Elvis's first record had a blues on one side, "That's All Right, Mama," Big Boy Crudup song, and a Bill Monroe song, I think it was "Blue Moon in Kentucky," on the other side. So that's, I think, where rock and roll comes, is from the melding of the blues and the country music. But then a lot of Monroe's stuff is very blues oriented too. Mule Skinner blues and the Jimmy Rogers blue yodels. It's kind of foundational.
Finally, Mitch, what are you up to these days? I know fly artists, folklore international artists, it's been difficult the last few months. You had to.
Yeah, I mean, for our whole business model is based on several hundred people gathering in one place to listen to music, and that's not happening. We're starting a record label, Fly Records, and our first release will be a record of Doc Watson instrumentals, stuff that I kind of culled from this stuff that I produced of his back in the 80s. And I spend a lot of time playing guitar, and I'm working on a new album where I've composed music to songs by the poet William Blake, called Blues of an Ancient Bard, that I hope to get out before too long. It's been I have a friend who called it my white whale. It's been hanging around for a while. I'm hoping to use this downtime to get it out there.
Well, great. Well, another reason why I wanted to do this is because, as you know, and as some people know in the audience, I play guitar. We have a few items here in the back. I've been very fond of this one that you know now. It's called Tiple. It's a Colombian 12-string guitar.
Yeah, I miss our music sessions, Betto. We have to figure out a way to do that.
Well,
I actually had a socially distant jam session with my partner, my String Madness partner, Peter Spellman, the other day. He came to our back porch and we stayed 6 feet apart, and we actually played together, first time in months.
Well, I think we can probably do something like that too. And here at the Village Green, we have a big open green area.
Oh yeah.
And we've been hanging out with friends as well, so we can certainly do that.
Let's work on that.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, thanks again. Once again, the book is called Raised by Musical Mavericks, Recalling Life Lessons from Pete Seeger, Lightning Hopkins, Doc Watson, Reverend Gary Davis, and others. It's by my dear friend Mitch Greenhill, and as he said, it's available on Amazon, or you can order directly from him. Go to his Facebook page, and you can find it there. And Mitch, I want to say thank you. I want to say salud with my cool glass here that I got at the hippest bar in Mexico City called Tenapa, where all the mariachis and all the big names and rancheras have performed. I want to say salud.
Salud a tu.
Yes. And to Chucho, thank you so much, Chucho, for for those of you who may not know, and all those pictures and videos that you've seen in the last hour and a half, my nephew in Mexico has been behind the scenes producing the show, the technical aspect of it.
Thank you, Chucho. And thank you, Betto. It's always a pleasure.
So we're going to go out with the video. And thank you so much. Muchas gracias, Mitch. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.